In the Time of the Butterflies by Julia Alvarez. Part 3, Chapter 10. Patria, January to March 1960. I don't know how it happened that my cross became bearable. We have a saying around here, a humpback never gets tired carrying his burden on his back. All at once I lost my home, my husband, my son, my peace of mind. But after a couple of weeks living at Mama's, I got used to the sorrows heaped upon my heart. The first day was the hardest. I was crazy with grief, all right. When Dede and Tono walked me into the house, all I wanted to do was lie down and die. I could hear the babies crying far off and the voices calming them, and Nora sobbing along with her Aunt Mate, and all their grief pulled me back from mine. But first, I slept for a long time, days it seemed. When I woke up, Dede's voice was in my ear invoking the Lord's name. And on the third day he rose again. I got up from bed ready to set up housekeeping at Mama's. I asked for a basin for the baby's bath, and I told Norris that she had to do something about that hair in her eyes. Mate and I moved into the front room with a crib for both our babies. I put Norris and Manu and Manolito in the spare room Minerva always used. Mama, I thought, would do better by herself in her own room. But past midnight, the sleepers began to shift beds, everyone seeking the comfort of another body. Manolito invariably crawled in with me, and soon after Raulito would start bawling. That boy was jealous, even in his sleep. I'd bring him to my bed, leaving the crib empty, for Jacqueline was already cuddled at her mother's side. In the mornings, I'd find Norris and Minu in Mama's bed, their arms around each other, fast asleep. And on the third day, he rose again. On my third day at Mama's, instead of a resurrection, I got another crucifixion. The sim came from Mate. It was 3 months before I laid eyes on her, or Minerva, or our husbands. 3 months before I got to hold my Nelson. As I said, I recovered, but every now and then I couldn't get the pictures out of my head. Over and over again I saw the sim approaching. I saw Nelson and Pedrito hurrying out the back way, Norris's stricken face. I saw the throng of men at the door. I heard the stomping, the running, the yelling. I saw the house burning. I saw tiny cells with very little air and no light. I heard doors open. I saw hands intrusive and ugly in their threats. I heard the crack of bones breaking, the thud of a body collapsing. I heard moans, screams, desperate cries. Oh, my sisters, my Pedrito, oh, my little lamb. My crown of thorns was woven of thoughts of my boy. His body I had talcumed, fed, bathed. His body now broken as if it were no more than a bag of bones. I've been good, I'd start screaming at the sky, undoing the recovery. And then Mama would have to send for Dede. Together, Dede and I would pray a rosary. Afterwards, we played our old childhood game, opening the Bible and teasing a fortune out of whatever verse our hands landed on. And on the third day, he rose again. It was odd living in Mama's new house. Everything from the old house was here, but all rearranged. Sometimes I'd find myself reaching for a door that wasn't there. In the middle of night, however fearful I was about waking the children, I had to turn on a light to go to the sanitary. Otherwise, I'd end up crashing into the cabinet that never used to be in the hallway in the old house. In the entryway hung the required portrait of El Jefe, except it wasn't our old one of Trujillo as a young captain that used to hang next to the Good Shepherd. Mama had acquired this latest portrait and hung it all by itself, out as far as she could get it from the rest of the house. He was older now, heavier, his jowls thicker, his whole face tired out, someone who had too much of all the bad things in life. Maybe because I was used to the Good Shepherd and Trujillo side by side in the old house, I caught myself praying a little greeting as I walked by. Then another time I came in from the outside with my hands full of anthuriums. I looked up at him and I thought, why not? I set up a vase on the table right under his picture. It seemed natural to add a nice little lace cloth for the table. I don't know if that's how it started, but pretty soon I was praying to him, not because he was worthy or anything like that. I wanted something from him, and prayer was the only way I knew to ask. It was from raising children I learned that trick. You dress them in their best clothes and they behave their best to match them. Nelson, my little devil. When he was little, he was always tormenting Norris, always getting into things. I'd call him in, give him a bath, but instead of putting him in his pajamas and sending him to bed in the middle of the day where he'd get bored and mean, I'd dress him up in his gabardine trousers and little linen gayabera, and I'd made him just like his father's, and then I'd take him with me to Salcedo for an afternoon novena and a coconut ice afterwards. That dressed up boy acted like an angel. So I thought, why not? Treat him like a spirit worthy of my attention, and maybe he would start behaving himself. Every day I changed the flowers and said a few words. Mama thought I was putting on a show for Peña and his sim, who came by often to check on the family. But Fela understood, except she thought I was trying to strike a deal with the evil one. I wasn't at all. I wanted to turn him towards his better nature. If I could do that, the rest would follow. Jefe, I would say, remember you are dust, and unto dust you shall return. That one never worked with him. Hear my cry, Jefe, release my sisters and their husbands and mine, but most especially I beg you, O Jefe, give me back my son. Take me instead. I'll be your sacrificial lamb. I hung my Sacred Heart, a recent gift from Don Bernardo, in the bedroom. There I offered, not my trick prayers, but my honest-to-God ones. I wasn't crazy after all. I knew who was really in charge. I had to let go of my hard feelings for the most part, but there was some lingering bitterness. For instance, I'd offered myself to El Jefe to do with as he wanted, but I hadn't extended the same courtesy to God. I guess I saw it as a clear-cut proposition I was making El Jefe. He would ask for what he always asked for from women. I would give that, but there would be no limit to what our Lord would want of Patria Mercedes, body and soul and all the etceteras besides. With the baby still tugging at my breast, a girl just filling out, and my young man son behind bars, I wasn't ready to enter his kingdom. In the midst of my trials, there were moments. I can't say there were moments of grace, but there were moments of knowing I was on the right track. One day, soon after Mate was taken, Peña showed up. That man gave me a creepy feeling, exactly the same one as I'd felt in the presence of the devil in the old days, fooling with my hands at night. The children were out in the patio with me. They kept their distance from Peña, refusing the candies he offered them unless I took them from him, in my hands first. When he reached for Minu to ride on his knee, all of them ran away. Lovely children, he said, to mask the obvious rejection. Are they all yours? No, the boy and the little girl are Minerva's, and the baby girl is Maria Teresa's. I said the names very clearly. I wanted it to sink in that he was making these children's orphans. The baby boy and the young girl are mine. Don Pedrito must love those children of his. My blood went cold. What makes you say so, Captain? I tried to keep my voice even. The Sim made your husband an offer, but he wouldn't take it. So he was still alive. 3 times Dede and Mama and Jaimito had been down to headquarters, only to be told that there was no record of our prisoners. Don't you know what the offer was? Peña seemed miffed. I had noted that he got some thrill out of having me plead for information. Yes, please, Captain. Your husband was offered his freedom and his farm back. My heart leapt. If he proved his loyalty to El Jefe by divorcing his Mirabal wife. Oh! I could feel my heart like a hand making a fist in my chest. Peña's sharp, pig-like eyes were watching me, and then he had his dirty little say. You Mirabal women must be something, he fondled himself, to keep a man interested when all he can do with his manhood is pass water. I had to say 2 glory bees to myself before I could speak out loud. Even so, my voice threw sparks. Captain Peña, no matter what you do to my husband, he will always be 10 times the man you are. That evil man threw back his head and laughed, then picked up his cap from his lap and stood to leave. I saw the lump he'd gotten by working me up to this state. I went in search of the children to calm myself down. I found Manu digging a hole in the ground and burying all the candies Peña had brought. When I asked her why she was wasting her candies, she said she was burying them like the box her mama and papa had buried in their yard that was bad to touch. "This is bad candy," she said to me. "Yes, it is," I said, and got down on my knees to help her finish burying it. Peña's mention of Pedrito was the first news we had of any of our prisoners. Then a few days later, Dede and Mama came back from another trip to the capital with the, quote, good news, end quote, that the girls' names, along with those of the men and my Nelson, had appeared on the latest list of 372 detained. Oh, how relieved we were. As long as the Sim admitted they were in custody, our prisoners stood less of a chance of being disappeared. Dark as it was, I went out into the garden with Mama's scissors. I cut by scent, more than sight, so that I didn't know exactly what I had until I was back inside. I arranged his spray of jasmine and stems of gardenias in a vase on the little table, then took the rest of the flowers into my bedroom. And on the third day he rose again. We were already working on the third week. Still, there were moments, like I said, resurrection, gathering speed. Sunday early, we packed ourselves in Jaimito's jeep. Except for a few farm horses over at Dede's and the old mule at Mama's, it was the only transportation left us, now that all the cars had been confiscated. Mama laid out an old sheet in the flatbed and put the children in back with me. She and Dede and Jaimito rode in front. It was still early morning as we drove toward Salcido for the first Mass. The mist was rising all around us from the fields. As we passed the turnoff to our old house in Canuco, I felt a stab of pain. I looked at Norris, hoping she hadn't noticed, but her pretty face was struggling to be brave. No one knew that the voice of God would speak from the pulpit that day. None of us would have expected it from Padre Gabriel, who was, we thought, a stooge substitute sent in after Padre de Jesus was arrested. When it came, I almost didn't hear it. Raulito was having one of his crying fits, and Jacqueline, who is empathic when it comes to tears, had joined in, and then Manu was busy reading my upside-down missal to Manolito. Dede and I were having a time managing the lot while Mama was doing her share, casting stern glances from the middle of our pew. As she's all too fond of telling us, we were raising savages with all our new theories about talking, not spanking, fighting tyrants and meanwhile creating little ones. I was headed to the vestibule with the children when I heard what I thought I had misheard. We cannot remain indifferent to the grievous blows we have afflicted so many good Dominican homes. Padre Gabriel's voice cracked over the loudspeaker. "Hush now," I said, so fiercely the children stopped their fussing and looked at me with full attention. "All human beings are born with rights derived from God that no earthly power can take away." The sun was shining through the stained glass window of John the Evangelist, depicted in a loincloth some church ladies had complained was inappropriate, even in our tropical heat. I popped Raulito up on the baptismal font and gave the other children mints to keep them quiet. To deny these rights is a grave offense against God, against the dignity of man. He went on, but I wasn't listening anymore. My heart was beating fast. I knew once I said it, I couldn't take it back. "Oh Lord, release my son," I prayed. And then I added what I'd been holding back. "Let me be your sacrificial lamb." When Padre Gabriel was done, he looked up, and there was utter silence in that church. We were stunned with the good news that our Gabriel had delivered unto us. If the church had been a place to clap, we would have drowned out his Dominus Vobiscum with applause. We stayed the whole day in Salcido, sitting in the park between masses, buying treats for the kids as bribes for the next hour-long mass. Their church clothes were soiled by the time the last mass rolled around at 6. With each service, the rumors spread, and the crowds grew. People kept coming back mass after mass. Undercover agents also started showing up. We could spot them easily. They were the ones who knelt with their butts propped on the pew seats and looked about during the consecration. I caught sight of Peña in the back of the church, no doubt taking notes of repeaters like me. Later we found out this was happening all over the country. The bishops had gathered together earlier in the week and drafted a pastoral letter to be read from the pulpit that Sunday. The church had at last thrown its lot with the people. That evening we rode home in high spirits, the babies fast asleep in the arms of the older children. It was already dark, but when I looked up at the sky I saw a big old moon like God's own halo hung up there as a mark of his covenant. I shivered, remembering my promise. We were worried about attending Mass the following Sunday. All week we heard of attacks on churches throughout the island. Down in the capital, somebody had tried to assassinate the Archbishop in the cathedral while he was saying Mass. Poor Pettini was so old and blind he didn't realize what was happening, but kept right on intoning the Kyrie as the assassin was being wrestled to the ground. Nothing as serious as that happened in our parish, but we had our own excitement. Sunday after the pastoral, we were visited by a contingent of prostitutes. When it was time for communion, there was such sashaying and swaying of hips to the altar rail, you'd have thought they were offering their body and blood, not receiving his. They lined up laughing, taunting Padre Gabriel by opening their mouths for the sacred host and making lewd gestures with their tongues. Then one of them reached right in his chalice and helped herself. This was like a gunshot in our congregation. 10 or 12 of us women got up and formed a cordon around our priest. We let in only those we knew had come to the table for salvation, not sacrilege. You can bet those puticas lit in to us. One of them shoved me aside, but did Petra and Mercedes turn the other cheek? Not on your life. I yanked that scrawny, done-up girl to the back of the church. Now, I said, you want to receive communion? You recite the credo first. She looked at me as if I had asked her to speak English. Then she gave me a toss of her head and marched off to the sim to collect whatever her charge was for desecrating. The following Sunday we arrived for early Mass and we couldn't get in the door for the stench inside. It took no time at all to find out what the problem was. Sin vergüenzas. They had come into the church the night before and deposited the contents of latrines inside the confessional. I sent the children home with Mama, afraid of some further incident with the sim. They, Norris, and I stayed to clean up. Yes, Norris insisted, though I fussed, that I wanted her home safe with the others. God's house was her house too, she argued. My prayers to the Virgin Sita to bring her around had been answered. I had to laugh. It was what Sor Asuncion always used to tell us. Beware what you ask God. He might just give you what you want. One morning, close to the month after Mate and Minerva had been taken, I had another visitor. Dede and Mama had gone to the capital to make their rounds. Their habit was to drive down every week with Jaimito or some other prisoner's family. They refused to take me along. They were sure someone at the SIM headquarters would realize they had overlooked me and grab me on the spot. Before heading home, they always drove out to La Victoria, out of desperation, I suppose, hoping to catch a glimpse of the girls. Of course, they never saw them, but often there were sheets and towels hanging to dry through the bars of windows, and this touch of domesticity always gave them hope. I was in the parlor teaching Norris how to applique monograms, just as I once taught Mate. The children were busy building their block palaces on the floor. Tono came in and announced there was a visitor. Instantly my heart sank, for I assumed it was Peña again. But no, it was Margarita, no last name given, wanting to see the doña of the house, though she couldn't say in relation to what. The young woman sitting on the stoop out back looked vaguely familiar. She had a sweet, simple face and dark, thick hair held back with bobby pins. The eyes, the brows, the whole look had Mirabal written all over it. I know, I thought, not now. She stood up the minute she saw me and bowed her head shyly. Could we speak privately? I wasn't sure what to expect. I knew Minerva had stayed in touch with them over the years, but I'd always kept my distance. I did not want to be associated with the issue of a campesina who had no respect for the holy bands of matrimony or for the good name of Mirabal. I nodded towards the garden where no one could overhear our talk. When we were a little ways down the path, she reached in her pocket and offered me a folded note. My hands began to shake. God be praised, I said, looking up. Where did you get this? My mother's cousin works in La Victoria. He doesn't want his name mentioned. I unfolded the note. It was the label off a can of tomato paste. The back had been written on. We're in cell number 61, Pavilion A, La Victoria. Dulce, Miriam, Violetta, Acela, Delia, Sina, Minerva, and me. Please notify their families. We are well, but dying for news of home and the children. Please send Trinaline, as we are all down with a bad grip, and Lomotil for the obvious. Any food that keeps. Many kisses to all, but especially to my little darling. And then, as I wouldn't recognize that pretty hand in a million years, the note was signed. As if I wouldn't recognize that pretty hand in a million years, the note was signed Mate. My head was spinning with what needed to be done. Tonight, with Mama and today, I would write a reply and fix up a package. Can we send something back with your relative? She nodded, lingering as if she had something else to say. I realized I had forgotten there was always a charge for such services. Wait here, please, I said, and ran to the house to get my purse. She looked pained when I offered her the bills. No, we wouldn't take anything from you. Instead, she handed me a card with the name of the pharmacy I always went to in Salcedo. Her own name was written on the back. Margarita Mirabal, to serve you. That Mirabal was something of a shock. Thank you, Margarita, I said, offering her my hand. Then I added the words I found hard to wrench from my prideful heart. Petra Mercedes, to serve you. When she had left, I read Mate's note over and over, as if with each reading new information would surface. Then I sat down on the bench by the birds of paradise, and I had to laugh. Papa's other family would be the agents of our salvation. It was ingenious, and finally I saw all wise. He was going to work several revolutions at one time. One of them would have to do with my pride. That night, Dede and Mama and I stayed up late preparing the package. We made sweet potato biscuits and molasses, which had to have a lot of nutrition, and filled a bag full of little things that wouldn't spoil. We packed a change of underwear for each of them and socks, and inside the socks I stuck a comb and brush for them to share. I couldn't imagine how Mate was taking care of that long hair. Our little pile of things grew. We began arguing over what was necessary. Mama thought it would be a mistake to send Mate her good black towel she had made the week she was home to save her nerves. She had finished appliquing the M in golden satin, but had not gotten to the G yet. The more you send, the more chances someone along the way will steal the whole thing. Aye, Mama, have a little faith. She put her hands on her hips and shook her head at me. Petra Mercedes, you should be the first one to know. We kept our sentences incomplete whenever we were criticizing the government inside the house. There were ears everywhere, or at least we imagined them there. There is no towel for a jail cell, Mama finished, as if that was what she'd been saying from the start. They convinced her. We used the same argument about the manicure set, the case with lipstick and face powder, and the little bottle of Matador's Delight. Those little touches of luxury would raise the girl's spirits. How could Mama argue with that? Tucked inside Mate's prayer book, I put some money in our note. Dearest Minerva and Mate, we are petitioning at headquarters, and God willing, some door will open soon. The children are all well, but missing you terribly. Please advise of your health and any other needs. Also, what of the men? And dear Nelson? Send any news, and remember, you are in our hearts and prayers of Patria and Dede and your loving mother. Mama wrote her own name. I couldn't keep back my tears when I saw her struggling with the pen and then ruining her signature by running the ink with her tears. After Mama went to bed, I explained to Dede, who had brought the note over. I had been vague with Mama so as not to open old wounds. She looks like Mate, I reported. She's quite pretty. I know, Dede admitted. It turned out she knew a lot more. Back when Papa died, Minerva asked me to take out of her inheritance for those girls' education. Dede shook her head, remembering. I got to thinking about it and I decided to put in half. It wasn't all that much, she added, when she saw my face. I was a little hurt not to be included in this charitable act. Now the oldest has her pharmacy degree and is helping out the others. A fine girl, I agreed. There isn't... There isn't any other kind of Mirabelle girl, Dede said, smiling. It was a remark Papa used to make about his girls. Back then, we had assumed he was just talking about us. Something wistful and sisterly hung in the air. Maybe that's why I went ahead and asked her, "And you, Dede, how are you doing?" She knew what I meant. I could read a sister's heart even if it was hidden behind a practiced smile. Padre de Jesus had told me about an aborted visit that they had made to his rectory, but since the girl's arrest, we were all too numb to feel or talk of any other grief. Jaimito is behaving himself very well. I can't complain, she said. Behave? What a curious word to use. What a curious word for a wife to use about her husband. Often now they slept over at Mama's with the two younger boys, to keep an eye on us, so she said. Things are all right then? Jaimito's been great, Dede went on, ignoring my question. I'm very grateful since I know he didn't want any part of this mess. None of us did, I observed, and then, because I could see her drawing in, I turned away, and any implied criticism of Jaimito actually, unlike Minerva, I liked our blustery cousin. Under all his swagger, that man had a good heart. I took her hand. When all this is over, please get some counsel from Padre de Jesus. Faith can strengthen a marriage, and I want you both to be happy together. Suddenly she was in tears, but then she always got weepy when I spoke to her that way. I touched her face and motioned for us to go outside. What's wrong? You can tell me, I asked, as we walked up the moonlit drive. She was looking up at the sky. The big old moon of a few days back had shrunk to something, with a big slice of itself gone. Jaimito's a good man, whatever anyone thinks, but he would have been happier with someone else, that's all. There was a pause. And you? I prodded. I suppose, she admitted. But if she had a ghost in her heart, she didn't give out his name. Instead, she reached up as if the moon were a ball falling into her empty hands. It's late, she said. Let's go to bed. As we made our way back down the drive, I heard a distinct cough. We've got visitors again, I whispered. I know, she said. Ghosts all over the place. The minute Jaimito's pickup turned onto the road in the mornings for daily mass, the little toy engine sound of a VW would start up. All night we smelled their cigarettes in the yard and heard muffled coughs and sneezes. Sometimes we would call out, God bless you. As the days wore on, we began taking our little revenges on them. There was a nook where one side of the house met another, and that was their favorite after-dark hiding place. Mama put some cane chairs out there along with a crate with an ashtray so they'd stop littering her yard. One night she set out a thermos full of ice water and a snack as if the three kings were coming. They stole that thermos and glasses and the ashtray. Instead of using the path Mama had cleared for them, they trampled through her flowers. The next day Mama moved her thorn bushes to that side of the yard. That night when she heard them out there, she opened up the bathroom window and dumped Jacqueline's dirty bathwater out into the yard. There was a surprised cry, but they didn't dare come after us. After all, they were top-secret spies, and we weren't supposed to know they were out there. Inside, Dede and I could barely contain our hilarity. Manu and Jacqueline laughed in that forced way of children imitating adult laughter they don't really understand. Next morning we found bits of fabric and threads and even a handkerchief caught on the thorns. From then on, when they spied on us, they kept a respectful distance from the house. Getting our packet to Margarita took some plotting. The morning after her visit, we stopped at the pharmacy on the way back from daily mass. While the others waited in the pickup, I went in. I was holding Raulito in such a way that his blanket covered up the package. For once, that little boy was quiet, as if he could tell I needed his good behavior. It was strange going into that pharmacy now that I knew she worked there. How many times in the past hadn't I dropped in to buy aspirin or formula for the baby? How many times hadn't the sweet, shy girl in the white jacket taken care of my prescriptions? I wonder if she had known all along who I was. If it's any problem, I began, handing her the package. Quickly, she slipped it under the counter. She looked at me pointedly. I should not elaborate in this public place. Margarita scowled at the large bill I pressed into her hand. In a whisper, I explained it was for the Lomotil and Trinolin and vitamins I wanted her to include in the package. She nodded. The owner of the pharmacy was approaching. I hope this helps, Margarita said, handing me a bottle of aspirin to disguise our transaction. It was the brand I always bought. That week, Mama and Dede came back elated from their weekly trip. They had seen a black towel hanging out the window of La Victoria. Dede couldn't be sure, but she thought she saw a zigzag of something in the front, probably the monogram. And who else would have a black towel in prison? I know, Mama said. I already heard it several times coming home. She mimicked Dede. See, Mama, what a good idea it was to send that towel? The truth is, Mama continued, it was her favorite phrase these days, I didn't think it'd get to her. I'd gotten so I suspect everyone. Look at this, Jaimito called us over to where he was sitting at the dining room table reading the papers he'd bought in the capital. He pointed to a photograph of a ghostly bunch of young prisoners, heads bowed, as El Jefe wagged his finger at them. 8 prisoners pardoned yesterday at the National Palace. He read off the names, among them Dulce Tejeda, Miriam Morales, and also who, according to Mate's note, shared a cell with her and Minerva. I felt my heart lifting, my cross lighter as a feather. All 8 pardoned prisoners were either women or minors. My Nelson had only turned 18 a few weeks ago in prison. Surely he still counted as a boy. My God, here's something else, Jaimito went on. Captain Victor Alcinio Peña was listed in the real estate transactions of having bought the old Gonzalez farm from the government for a pittance. He stole it is what he did, I blurted out. Yes, the boy stole the mangoes, Dede said in a loud voice to conceal my indiscretion. Last week Tono had found a little rod behind Mama's wedding picture, a telltale sign of bugging. Only in the garden or riding around in a car could we speak freely with each other. The truth is, Mama began, but stopped herself. Why give out the valuable truth to a hidden microphone?